In the dead of winter, Ukraine says Russia unleashed a wave of air attacks so large it lasted for hours and reached deep into the day. A mix of drones and missiles aimed at homes, the power grid, and critical infrastructure across the country. Ukrainian officials say at least 3 civilians were killed, including a 4-year-old child, as air raid alerts spread across multiple regions and emergency crews worked under the threat of repeat strikes. Ukraine's Air Force said the barrage included 635 drones of various types and 38 missiles, with Ukrainian air defenses reporting that most were shot down or otherwise neutralized. Even with high interception claims, officials said there were still hits and damage, and that is the point of these swarms: overwhelm, distract, and slip enough through to break systems people rely on. The scale matters because it is not just about a single night, it is about endurance. The temperature drops, the daylight shrinks, and every damaged transformer or substation turns into a race between repair crews and the next strike. This particular attack, reported on December 23, hit 13 regions, according to Ukrainian authorities, and triggered widespread outages at a moment when electricity is not simply about lights. It is about heat, water, communications, hospitals, and the ability of a city to function normally. And there is an emotional edge to it, too. Ukraine's president framed the timing as a message, a strike just before Christmas as families try to gather and as diplomacy, however strained, continues in the background. In Poland, across the border, the military said it scrambled fighter jets to protect its airspace during the strike. A reminder that every large Russian attack near western Ukraine also raises the risk of spillover and escalation anxieties for NATO eastern flank. What is confirmed from multiple reports is the broad pattern. Drones first, often in large numbers, and then missiles layered in, sometimes targeting the same energy nodes repeatedly, sometimes hitting residential areas and transport and port infrastructure, forcing utilities to cut power in controlled ways to prevent wider collapse. Ukraine's acting energy minister described this as one of the year's major attacks on the energy system, and officials said restoration work would begin as soon as the security situation allowed. A phrase that captures the basic dilemma. You cannot safely repair a substation while air defenses are still tracking incoming targets. Ukraine's largest private energy supplier, DTEK, said the attack targeted thermal power stations, adding that it was part of a series of repeated strikes against its facilities. The company has described hundreds of hits on its thermal plants since the full-scale invasion began, illustrating how the energy war is not incidental. It is central. So why drones, and why now at this scale? Because the drone has become the workhorse of long-range pressure. It is cheaper than many missiles. It can be produced in high volumes. It can be modified, and it forces defenders to spend resources, attention, and expensive interceptors on targets that might be decoys as much as they are explosives, and because winter amplifies the effect. A summer blackout is disruptive. A winter blackout can be dangerous. It turns a military campaign into a direct test of civilian resilience, and it turns every power plant into a strategic target. Analysts and reporting over the past year have described how Russia has adapted its aerial campaign, modifying drones to improve their odds of getting through, changing flight profiles and attack patterns, and focusing heavily on energy and heating infrastructure as temperatures fall. The technical details can feel abstract, but the lived experience is not. In many Ukrainian cities, the sound of drones has become a nightly rhythm, a buzzing in the sky that can last for hours, followed by the sharper crack of air defense fire, and then the uncertain wait for what comes next. Every large attack also creates a second wave of risk. Fires, falling debris, damaged gas and power lines, and the challenge of restoring service while also protecting crews and equipment from follow-on strikes. Ukraine's Air Force said it stopped the majority of the incoming drones and missiles on December 23. That matters because without those defenses, the damage could have been vastly worse. But even a small percentage of a very large number is enough to knock out key nodes in a grid that is already stretched thin. And that is the strategic logic of saturation. If a defender has to treat each incoming drone as a threat, the attacker gains leverage even if many drones never reach their targets. The goal becomes not just destruction, but exhaustion. You see that in the way these attacks are timed. They often come overnight, when detection and repair are harder, and they can stretch toward morning, forcing schools, businesses, and transport systems into delayed openings, emergency schedules, and disrupted logistics. There is also a messaging component. Large barrages demonstrate capacity. They show domestic audiences in Russia that the war machine is still delivering, and they signal to Ukraine and its partners that the cost of holding out will remain high. At the same time, Ukraine has pursued its own drone campaign against Russian targets, arguing it is necessary to reduce the resources that fund the war. That back and forth has helped push both sides into a new phase of conflict where distance no longer guarantees safety. But the most immediate stakes right now are humanitarian and infrastructural. When power is cut, water systems can fail, heating can drop, mobile networks can weaken, apartment blocks can go dark, hospitals switch to generators. And the longer the outage, the harder it becomes to keep normal life running, especially for children, older residents, and people with medical needs. And energy is only one layer. Ports, rail, and logistics hubs are also part of this contest. Reuters reporting in late December described how increased Russian drone and missile attacks on ports, particularly around Odesa, have disrupted Ukraine's agricultural exports, reducing capacity and forcing delays and defaults on some delivery contracts. That matters far beyond Ukraine. Ukraine remains a major supplier of grain and sunflower oil to global markets, and every disruption tightens shipping schedules, raises insurance costs, and injects uncertainty into food supply chains, especially for countries that rely on Black Sea routes. So when an attack hits port infrastructure, it is not only about local damage. It is about trade, foreign currency earnings, jobs, and the ability of a country at war to finance its defense and keep its economy functioning. The pattern is visible in earlier strikes, too. On December 13th, Reuters reported that a large Russian overnight attack on the power grid caused major blackouts in Odesa and surrounding areas, with Ukrainian officials saying more than 1 million households were left without power. And that Russia used more than 450 drones and 30 missiles in that strike. Put those attacks together, and you see a campaign that is not sporadic. It is sustained. It is trying to grind down capacity faster than repairs can restore it, and it is taking aim at both energy production and distribution. Ukraine and its partners have adapted over time, adding air defenses, hardening facilities, dispersing some capacity, and building backup systems. But the attacker adapts too, searching for gaps, changing roads, and introducing decoys to pull defenses away from true targets. This is why numbers alone do not tell the full story. Yes, it matters whether the count is 635 drones or more than 650. Different reports can reflect how decoys are counted or how radar tracks are grouped. The more important point is that the volume is now routinely in the hundreds, and that is transforming the character of the war. The drone war changes what is considered the front line. It is no longer only trenches and contested villages. It is also substations, rails, port cranes, fuel depots, and apartment rooftops. And it changes what defense looks like. Defense becomes layered. Long-range missiles for missiles, medium-range systems for aircraft, short-range guns, and electronic warfare for drones. And then the last resort, emergency services, shelters, and generators for when something gets through. That layered defense is expensive. Interceptors cost more than drones. Every launch is a calculation. Do you spend a missile on a target that could be a decoy, or do you risk it hitting a transformer that will take weeks to replace? This is also why energy workers have become a quiet form of frontline. Their job is not glamorous, but it is strategic. They patch lines, replace equipment, reroute power, and bring parts under difficult conditions, sometimes with only narrow windows between alerts. And every repair is complicated by the nature of modern grids. A single large transformer is not something you buy off a shelf overnight. It is specialized, heavy, and often imported. That makes targeted strikes disproportionately damaging, even if the physical footprint of the blast is limited. In the background of all of this, diplomacy continues, though it remains fragile. Reporting around this December 23 strike described ongoing contacts involving U.S. and European representatives and Ukrainian officials, with public statements suggesting talks continue, but without clear breakthroughs. This is the central contradiction. Negotiations can occur while attacks intensify. In fact, pressure on civilians and infrastructure can be part of an attempt to shape the negotiating environment, to influence public morale, and to test how long a country can withstand hardship. From Ukraine's perspective, these barrages underscore why it keeps asking partners for more air defense systems, more ammunition, and faster delivery schedules. From Russia's perspective, large strikes are often justified as targeting military, industry, or energy facilities linked to Ukraine's war effort. But the impact on civilians and on basic services is repeatedly documented by Ukrainian authorities and international reporting. So what should people watch next? First, the rhythm. After a massive strike, there is often a lull, then another wave, sometimes with altered tactics. The attacker looks for what still works. The defender patches the holes and shifts the shield. Second, the target set. If strikes continue to focus on energy and ports, the economic impact could deepen, affecting export volumes, budget revenues, and the cost of imports, while also complicating winter survival for millions. Third, the regional factor. Every time Poland scrambles jets, it reinforces how close the war's air dimension runs to NATO territory, and why Allied governments monitor these nights with particular concern. Fourth, the air defense equation. Ukraine's ability to protect key sites depends on stockpiles, maintenance, radar coverage, and the mix of systems available. Large drone swarms are designed to test the seams between those layers. And fifth, the human element. The headlines capture numbers and maps, but the story, in the end, is about people trying to live ordinary lives under extraordinary conditions. Charging phones during brief power windows, queuing for water, checking on neighbors, and listening for the next alert. There is also a longer strategic question emerging here. What does victory, or even stability, look like in a war where hundreds of drones can be launched in a single night? If this is the new normal, then resilience becomes as important as defense. That means more than interceptors. It means distributed generation, microgrids, backup power for hospitals and pumping stations, rapid repair teams, and deeper coordination with European partners to import electricity or equipment when needed. It also means economic resilience, keeping exports moving, even if routes shift from major ports to rail or Danube alternatives, and protecting the infrastructure that keeps trade possible. For global audiences, this matters because Ukraine's infrastructure is tied to global markets. Disruptions ripple outward, not just in food and fuel, but in shipping routes, insurance rates, and the political pressure that comes when prices rise. For Ukrainian audiences, the message of a strike like this is harsh but clear. Winter is a battlefield, and the energy grid is one of its main fronts. And for policymakers, the question becomes whether air defense assistance and infrastructure support can keep pace with the evolving scale of drone warfare, and whether diplomacy can meaningfully reduce the incentive to keep escalating. And on December 23, the reporting and official statements point to a massive coordinated Russian barrage, a heavy focus on energy, widespread outages, and civilian deaths. Even as Ukraine says, it intercepted most incoming targets. That is what happened. What is confirmed is that the war's air dimension is intensifying in volume and frequency, and that energy and logistics systems remain central targets. Why it matters is simple. Electricity is life in winter, and the ability to keep the grid functioning is tied directly to Ukraine's resilience, its economy, and the well-being of civilians. What comes next will likely depend on two clocks running at once. The military clock of the next barrage and the diplomatic clock of weather talks can produce a framework that reduces attacks rather than merely describing them. For now, Ukraine's message is that it needs stronger defenses and faster repairs. Russia's actions signal it intends to keep testing those defenses. And the civilians caught in between are left measuring the war in hours of electricity, degrees of warmth, and the uneasy silence between sirens.